In this video, I'm going to explain how governments force poverty and how to break free. I'm going to explain how no country in the world in 2025 still use money, how corrupt governments leverage education to keep you in the dark, and how a political system around the world is losing respect and essentially power. How come no government around the world still uses money? Okay, well, let's break this down. Firstly, you've got to understand the 6 fundamental criterias that money actually has that fiat currency doesn't, and that's what we use at the moment, fiat currency. So both money and fiat currency are durable. So, they last reasonably long time. They are portable, you can carry them around in your pocket. They are fungible, which means you can exchange them for the same amount of money. They're divisible, so you can take 10 and split it into 5 or whatever. They are unit of account, which means they actually have numbers on it. But this is the difference between money and fiat currency, which everyone uses at the moment. That's a counterfeit version of money. The very difference is money is a store of value, which means it actually has intrinsic value. The important part to understand about that is when you actually have money, the government or nobody can take that away from you because you actually have something. Like, for example, if you took a bit of gold and you minted it and you put numbers on it and you created a coin out of it, then that would essentially be money, okay? If you did the same thing with a bit of metal which wasn't worth anything and you put numbers on it and you called it a $1 or £1 bit, then that would be counterfeit. So that's the first thing. Governments are actually counterfeiting money. And I don't know why anyone accepts that. That is fundamentally corrupt. No, it doesn't matter which way you look at it. But what it actually allows them to do is it actually allows them to have a system called fractional reserve banking. Now, they don't teach you this in school. They don't teach you this in college. They don't teach it in university. What fractional reserve banking actually allows private banks to do, let's break down the word. A fractional reserve. So if you actually take in 10%, for example, each individual bank or country has their different fractional reserve amounts. If you say bring in, say, 10% hypothetically, then that private bank is actually able to, just by typing in numbers into a computer, create 90% more money. So they can actually create $90 by you bringing in $10, and then they can lend that $90 out. What a lot of people don't understand is the more currency you put into circulation, the more it dilutes the actual value of every single dollar because it's not real money. Real money, it'll be impossible to do that. I mean, they did have the gold standard. That's something a little bit different, but they don't want you to know that. I mean, that's fundamentally corrupt. They're purposely deceiving the population. Now, the whole point of government is to help and protect people. When they use fractional reserve banking, is dishonest. If you want to learn more, then I highly recommend you watch Mike Maloney's Hidden Secrets of Money. It's by far, in my opinion, the best 10-part series. It will explain every individual detail, the difference between fiat currency and real money. 2. So how these corrupt governments are leveraging education to keep you poor. Firstly, they don't want people to really understand what money is. Henry Ford said, "It's well enough that people of the nation do not understand our banking and monetary system. For if they did, I believe there will be a revolution before tomorrow morning." And I've got parents who really don't, or who are baby boomers, who really don't want to know about this sort of stuff. And that's exactly why that's why there is poverty. That's the fundamental reason why there's poverty, because people have got their heads in buckets of sand and they've got no bloody idea what's going on. The way we fight this, the way we get around this, is we educate people and you learn about this sort of stuff. So that's really important. Not only the standard curriculum in the countries around the world don't teach fractional reserve banking, is a big sign of the fundamental corruption of a country. It's not something the public should accept. In addition to that, mainstream media is funded. Mainstream media is actually state government funded. It's funny when I watch the BBC or Channel 9 or NBC, and you have the same pictures on all of these channels around the world. It's kind of like when you have the Soros-funded NGO, and they all have the same signs. It doesn't matter if in America or England or Australia, they've all got the same, it's like the same person made it all. Like, if you got any sort of brains or any sort of common sense, most people can see straight through that, which is why a lot of people from the left are starting to realize that it's just ran by devil people. And finally, the third level is how the political system is also fundamentally corrupt, which is basically forcing poverty. So first thing is, one of the biggest businesses in the country is the federal government. It's the biggest company. Now you might think, oh, it's not a real company. Well, hang on a second. What is a company? It's a group of people working towards a common goal. Now, yes, a regular business is for profit, which means they're legally bound to try to make efforts to make that business profitable. Whereas if you are a charity, then you don't have that legal requirement. Very much like the government. What they do is they charge people through taxes, they take that capital and they use it for services to help the actual country. The problem is, because the government doesn't make any profit, it's a very, very inefficient business. The bigger the government and the smaller the capitalist, which is actually profitable, the less opportunity it is to be rich and the more poverty it is, because it's top heavy. All of the bureaucrats clean a lot of the money out, and not to mention the corruption. And in Australia, we've just spent $93 million on a website for weather forecast. I mean, that is just like, I run a software company. There's no way any website would cost anywhere near $1 million, never mind $93 million. It's just a pure and utter scam, and it's essentially theft. Not to mention the lobbyists who actually guide or even bribe, in many cases, government officials to keep them on their side. The whole system is so corrupt, it's ridiculous. I believe governments could actually, if a savvy business person and a savvy business team ran the government, we could probably do it for less than half the amount of money and make all of the services 2 or 3 times better. I'll be making a video on that at a later date, so keep your eye out for that video. I mean, if you think about it, if the government is the biggest business in the country, to qualify to be a politician, wouldn't you think it would be reasonable that we have to have run a big business in the past? Of course it would be, but they're not, because you can't lead a savvy business person down the wrong path, but you can lead a politician because they're not qualified to run government. And then this is the biggest kicker. This is one of the worst things. Governments, let's just take the UK for example. UK legislation allows politicians to say whatever they want in their manifesto, get into power, and do none of it. And there's no legal requirement. That is fucking crazy. That is absolutely nuts. So we've got we've got counterfeit currency, we've got an education system that keeps everyone in the dark, funded by the taxpayer, and then you've got unqualified politicians misguided by lobbyists and legally not held to account. And then you pay your taxes. It funds that whole thing. Shit, I mean, that is some crazy shit. It seriously is. That's why I like nomad capitalists. Go where you're treated best. Because if you're in one of these legacy countries and you're working your arse off and you're actually paying tax, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't pay tax, people have to do that. Well, what you're essentially doing is you're essentially funding corruption and the pain, suffering and death of your countrymen and women. That's what you're doing. There's 3 things that I believe that could happen to change that. 1, you leave the country legally, you pay your taxes, and you get out and you stop funding that corruption. 2, the bill put into place that can hold politicians to account if they don't follow through on their manifesto promises. And 3rd option would be to completely dissolve government, not have any politicians, and create a blockchain voting system, so the actual people who are qualified in the country to vote would be able to make the decisions for the country and not have politicians argue about it. In fact, there wouldn't be any arguing. You wouldn't have a bunch of unqualified muppets in the House of Commons or whatever comparison you have in your country arguing and calling each other's names like children do in a schoolyard. Now, I understand that policies need to be debated in our current political environment. But if we dissolved government and we had a blockchain voting system, the whole thing was completely unnecessary. So there's 3 options. You know, I think option 2 is probably one of the best ones, to actually create a bill. And if reform gets into the UK, obviously, you know, They won't want to change it. The thing is, if you actually look throughout history, but every single politician gets in, when they say they're going to do something on a manifesto and then get into power and they don't do it, we're just going round like a hamster on a wheel, year after year after year after year after year, and we're just getting, and the taxpayers, the average common person, is just getting screwed. And the way you fight that is you learn and you become financially independent by leveraging systems and not going out and selling your time in a job or that 5, 10, 20-year career, which means you're always going to be poor, you're never going to understand what's going on, and you're just going to be on this perpetual hamster wheel of unhappiness and poverty.